Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to episode 31 of Opening Basics. In this video I wanted to do something a little different. I'm not going to talk about specific lines, but I'm going to talk about the general idea of an opening repertoire and how to build an opening repertoire for yourself. So to start off with, let's talk about what an opening repertoire is. An opening repertoire is different than an opening survey. That's what I've been doing, say in the E4, E5. I kind of surveyed all of the different lines that occur after the moves E4, E5. A repertoire is taking a particular point of view and choosing specific lines. So first of all, you have to say whether it's an opening repertoire for white or for black. So let's start out. Let's say we're building an opening repertoire for white. What this means is that you have the white pieces and you have an idea in mind already of what you're going to play, regardless of what your opponent does, or you have an answer in mind for every different thing that he might try. Not that you're going to ignore his reply, but as he tries different moves, you have ideas already of what to play against them. So with white, you get to choose the first move. So you can build a complete opening repertoire for white around the move E4 by just always playing E4. And then to continue this repertoire, though, you need to have an answer for every possible black reply. So the main replies are E5 and C5, and I've actually already covered those in the opening basics. So you could start to build an opening repertoire for white around E4 using those videos and selecting lines that have been covered there. But you would have to supplement that. You would have to add some ideas about what to do against the other common responses here. There's the French defense with E6. There's the Caro-Kann with C6. There's the center counter with D5. There's Alechin's defense with Knight F6. And then there's other, it's a little more obscure ways to play, but black can play with D6 or with G6. A lot of times, if you're getting into some opening that you haven't seen before, you can just fall back on general principles. You know, put another pawn in the center, develop your knights to central squares, try and fight for the control of the center, and just remember to be especially alert for tactics if you're into some opening that you're not familiar with, because these unique openings often have some specific tactical ideas that are not common to other openings. So you just have to tune up your tactical alertness a little bit, but then play solidly and try and contest the center, and you should be in good shape. So let's continue with this a little bit. Suppose you're playing E4 and your opponent has played E5. What kind of choices do you have here? You've got the mainline moves like knight to F3, and you have also offbeat moves like knight to C3, the Vienna game. There's F4, the King's Gambit. A lot of times it's useful to have a couple of different ways of playing a particular position. One thing I like to do is to have like a safe variation. So you play something that you know is going to be solid, and you'll get out of the opening without too much trouble and get into a playable middle game. And then there are other openings that are maybe a secondary choice, is to have an opening that is more aggressive and leads to more interesting play. So, for example, in this position, you could try playing both knight F3 and pawn to F4, the King's Gambit, and just kind of switch between them according to whether you feel like your opponent is better prepared for the more tactical line or the more positional line, say, and how you're feeling too. Sometimes you don't necessarily feel like this sharp tactical clash, and sometimes you really want that. So it's good to have a couple of options. Also, it makes you a little bit less predictable, so your opponent can't rely on seeing the same opening every time he faces you if you play some of the same players over and over again. A second point to keep in mind is that there's nothing wrong with playing the main line. In fact, that's probably the safest choice. Sometimes players will seem to avoid main lines, perhaps because they're afraid that their opponent will be better prepared than they are or know more about the opening. But these main moves have been played many times, and they've stood the test of time. I mean, players keep playing these moves because they give good games to both sides. So I would say don't be afraid of the main moves. But sometimes you may want to play something that's slightly less common. This is still the main move, like bishop c5, bishop c4 here, the Italian game. I recommend this a lot because it gives you a lot of flexibility. The main move here, of course, is bishop to b4. And if you follow the main line of the Ruy Lopez, or the Spanish game here, you will end up in a closed position. And I think for players who are learning how to play the game, it's better to play open lines. So you can almost always get an open game after bishop to c4. Another way to get an open game here, by the way, is to play d4, the Scotch game. And that leads to interesting play as well. So I can recommend both those moves for the learning player, either the Scotch game or the Italian game. But let's just I wanted to make one further point about the Italian game. You can play this in either a closed or an open fashion. So, for example, right here in this position, after the two knights come out, the two knights defense, the main response here is d3. And this leads to a closed variation of the Italian game. So I don't really recommend that. I like to play for myself knight g5. It's an interesting way to play, and it's going to lead to some open lines. The main response here is d5. You also have to worry about the crazy move bishop to c5, where you're going to grab on f7 and get into some wild tactics. So this is an example of where you have a choice, where you might want to play knight g5 if you're in this tactical kind of move, and you want to play d3 if you want to play something a little more solid. Okay, so that's my advice, is try and get open lines, and just go through the opening basics series for the opening and choose lines that you think appeal to you. Try them out and see how you fare. I think it's good to experiment in the openings and try and develop a feel for different openings and try and get some idea of what your own style is before you settle down and determine to play any particular line or learn it in any great depth. Now the one here, let's turn the board around and take a look at this from the black point of view. The one thing I would caution is there are some openings which are highly tactical and which are also highly popular. So the one opening I avoid, for example, is the Sicilian Najdorf. So e4, c5, I play the Sicilian. And of course I also play e5, I switch it up there. But if we go down the main line, knight f3, d6, pawn takes, pawn d5 takes, knight to f6, attacking the pawn, knight here defending it, and now a6 is the most popular move in the database. And I don't actually play this move myself. What I played here is I usually play knight to c6, which is the second choice here, the classical variation. I've also played g6 when I'm in the mood for a real sharp tactical game. But I avoid g6 these days for the same reason that I avoid a6. So g6 is known as the dragon variation, and a6 is the Najdorf. And the thing is, in my experience, the white players that I play against at my level, they all have faced both those openings quite a bit and already have a line in mind. So there is something to be said for avoiding the line that is absolutely the most popular. Because if you just continue playing the main line, your opponent can get in kind of lots of easy moves where he knows what's going on. So I do recommend at some point stepping away from the main line and playing something a little bit offbeat. And that's my answer here, is going for the classical variation with knight to c6. Let me give one other example. Let's take the example of the Nimzo Indian. So I play d4. And we can get into the Nimzo Indian this way, typically c4, e6. And now black can bring the bishop out to b4 and pin the knight if if you play the knight here. Actually, the most popular move right now is knight to f3, avoiding the Nimzo Indian, but it's okay to play this. This is still a solid line. And after bishop to b4, you have a couple of choices how to reply. There's several choices. There's knight f3, which I haven't played, but it's interesting. There's queen c2, which is the most popular move these days. That's known as the classical variation. And then there's the move I play, e3, the Rubinstein variation. So the advantage of the Rubinstein variation is that it's a solid way to play, but it's also one that's not seen as much nowadays, but it was played quite a bit in the previous century. So the kinks of it have been worked out. It's a good way for white to play. And at the same time, it's a line where your opponent may not be as familiar with it as you are. If you consistently play this E3 move, rather, you can get positions that you're more familiar with than your opponent. So that's an example of maybe one of my other guidelines here. If you want to get a line which is not the absolute most popular line these days, but was popular in the past, say from the middle of the 20th century to any time in the second half of the 20th century, chess technique, from the 1930s on, chess technique was already quite good at that point, and so any lines that were playable back then are most likely still playable today. You might want to check them out with a chess engine just to make sure there's no hidden gotchas that have been discovered, but for the most part, these lines, for example, this E3 Sicilian was played, E3 Nimzo rather, was played quite a bit at the Zurich tournament in 1953, and it's still so it got quite a workout there. It did well, and it's still playable today. So that's just kind of a rule of thumb if you want to build up a repertoire that's a little bit. It's not completely mainstream, so you give your opponent some new positions to look at, and it's still a quality position. It's not highly risky. So that's one thing you want to look for in a repertoire. After you've built up a repertoire, it gives you some kind of advantage in that the lines in your repertoire are your home court. You're more familiar with them than your opponent, and you should be able to use that to your advantage to some degree. So I think that sums up what I wanted to say about building a repertoire. Let's try and summarize it a little bit here. Let's back up to the opening position. So the first rule is to start with open games. Try and build up some experience with the tactical lines. Experiment with different openings. When you see an opening survey like I did, try out like I did with the E4, E5. Try out a lot of the different E4, E5 lines and see which ones appeal to you. And then if you find one that seems to fit your style or seems to score well for you, then add that to your repertoire. A repertoire is something that you build over time. So you start maybe with just one or two moves, and then as you gain experience with other lines, you can add them to your repertoire. It's okay to play the main lines. That's another point I wanted to make, because these main lines are there for a reason. They're good for both sides and generally lead to some interesting chess. There are some exceptions, like the Berlin defense. If you play the main line of that, it leads to pretty, to me it seems to be a pretty dull position. I don't like these queenless middle games with endless maneuvering, but that may be a matter of taste too. Maybe you like that. And then... if you are looking for ideas, different lines to try out, you don't always have to play what the top guys are playing. You can find main lines from 20, 30, or 50 years ago, and they're often still quite playable. A repertoire is something you should build up over time, and it's also something that should change over time. Just because if you keep playing the same openings over and over again, well, this is my feeling anyway, that it seems to get a little bit stale. So as you introduce new openings into your repertoire, you just try them out. Maybe they're a horrible failure and you will drop them, but sometimes you'll discover something you like, even maybe better than what you've been playing. And then that will become part of your repertoire after you've played it a few times. The advantage of playing all these different openings, by the way, is that you can find yourself, it's easier to get your bearings in unfamiliar positions. So your opponent sometimes will trick you with a move order, get you into an unfamiliar position. But if you've experienced a lot of different positions and tried them out at least once or twice, you may have some idea of what's going on and be able to deal with them. So anyway, that's it for my recommendations. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.